Board, Father Pt.1, Principal, Mrs. Margaret Campbell, other members of the Board of Management and Administration, faculty, other members of staff, our Honorable former Principal and most distinguished guest speaker, Dr. Fred Kelly, our supportive parents and guardians, other families and friends, my fellow graduates, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Indeed, I am grateful for the privilege to address you as a valedictorian for the graduating class of 2010. When we entered the college, five years ago, little did we know that we would have been transformed into rambunctious teenagers who played tricks on our teachers and shared jokes with our classmates while doing some schoolwork in our spare time. As we celebrate this landmark, I'm sure it is easy for Dr. Kennedy to notice the hiatus between us in first form and us now, especially because we are no longer boys, but men. Men of compassion, conscience, and competence. Undoubtedly, our alma mater is quite a unique institution, a school with a very rich heritage, academic excellence, successful sports programs, and disciplined students in the midst of a capital that is dubbed worldwide as one of the most dangerous places. We boast a tradition of having a wide cross-section of students from various backgrounds, with experiences that teach us to be tolerant and respectful of differences. With the World Cup quarterfinals now behind us, and Germany clearly looking the favorites. Tonight kicks off a summer filled with excitement in the minds of my fellow graduates, tears of disbelief in the eyes of our mothers, pride in the hearts of our fathers, and of course, extreme relief in the lives of our teachers. Ladies and gentlemen, as we celebrate our accomplishments tonight, we cannot forget the difficulties that came our way, nor can we overlook the challenges set before us. Over a month ago, some of our classmates were bombarded by the villainy of crime and corruption. Several were forced to witness traumatic incidents that could have easily scarred them emotionally. Some were victims of the senseless brutality between criminal elements in our societies and the police force. A few were even barred from writing some of their CSEC exams, and some were forced to cower in fear for their lives, as opposed to preparing for these major exams. As a Jesuit institution, we cannot celebrate with pomp and pageantry this evening while ignoring the harsh realities that some of us had to face. Life already poses many difficulties, and when our parliamentarians, regardless of political affiliation, continue to flirt and par with criminal elements for political expedience, it only sullies the integrity of our nation, breeds hopelessness among our citizens, and put our youth at greater risk. Distinguished guests, during the recent uprisings, we watched with bated breath and attentive eyes for our classmates from the affected communities to arrive at the examination center. As such, when we saw any of our fellow Georgian brothers, you could only imagine the relief that their presence brought us. This sad reality is a reminder to all of us that we should do our part to uproot violence from our communities, eliminate political corruption in our nation, speak out against social injustices in any form, and support a professional police force that respects the rights of every citizen, and the dignity of every human being. Teachers, it would be remiss of me to not acknowledge your own support during this time. So many of you braved the storm to meet us, or take us to different centers to sit our examinations, leaving your own families at home. I especially thank Mrs. Campbell for making the arrangements for us to sit our exams at Arden High School, and Mrs. Douglas, Miss Leverage, Mr. Robinson, and Miss Dare, who was with us at all times. They even made arrangements to rescue some of our classmates from the affected communities, so they could stay with other families from our school. Consequently, I also thank the families who were kind enough to host some of our brothers during this challenging time. Noble teachers, no increase in salary will ever be enough to compensate you for your hard work. But to secure my space in sixth form, let it be on the record that I do support a salary increase for teachers. Had we been given the choice of another set of teachers, we would happily choose these same men and women 10 times over, even though we informally diagnose all of them as either bipolar or suffering from dementia. Without calling any names, those who are bipolar would greet us with bright smiles. Yet, as soon as we committed what we deemed as mere boys with boys infractions, these pleasantries would immediately transform into loud anger. Mrs. Reynolds, Miss Leverage, Miss Dare, and Miss Davis will definitely be etched in the recesses of our minds forever. Similarly, the other 50% would give assignments with due dates for 2 weeks later, but return to class the following day demanding these assignments. Thankfully, Mrs. McLeod, Mrs. Black, Miss Hilton, and Miss Rufus will not remember this comment when I approach them for letters of recommendation. Additionally, apart from Miss Campbell's weekly devotions on the school's PA system, we were never allowed to forget that we attended a Catholic school, thanks to Father Ollie's extremely long prayers that seemed like eternal sermons, that ended with the repetition of, "The church says amen. The church says amen. The church says amen." Some of us were still asleep at the fifth. "The church says amen." Church, after today's graduation, don't say I didn't warn you. But Father Ollie, your benedictions were all appreciated. Interestingly, our teachers seem to have been paired by contrasting approaches. Lenient and not so lenient, to use an understatement. In other words, Mrs. Douglas versus Miss Leverage, Senor Blanco versus Mr. Sims, Miss Dallin versus Miss Hilton, or even in the PE department, Mr. Brown versus Mr. Douglas. Speaking of PE, my memories of PE classes do not include whatever activities were done during these sessions, but instead of Miss Bailey. Certainly, this is not because she was on the field playing football with us in her blue and white jersey, but because she always demanded her full 1 hour of class when we returned late from our PE classes. Too bad for me and my classmates. We had PE just before her math class and lunch immediately after. As a result, we and Miss Bailey hardly had lunch on these days. Her stubborn insistence for her full 1 hour made it difficult for any of us to fail math.